Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're now at the session that focuses on startups in our day-long economic summit. Entrepreneurs, the true innovators, builders, and boosters of the Indian economy. And you will all agree that our country's entrepreneurial ambition is the wind beneath the wings of our economy. Our Atmanirbhar Bharat vision is dependent on incubating and encouraging the nation's startups. Unicorn is a term that is used in the venture capital industry to describe a privately held startup company with a value of over $1 billion. And we've noticed that over 30 Indian startups have made it to the Unicorn Club just this year. But the challenge, therefore, is to keep this momentum going, and the race, we know, has only just begun.
Ancient India gave us the philosophy Artha, that is wealth creation. Modern India is embracing it. The startup ecosystem is booming. Indians are choosing to be job creators instead of job seekers. This entrepreneurial vigor has yielded results. India added 13 unicorns in Q2, second only to the US, taking the total number of unicorns to a whopping 70 plus. But the race has just begun. And on the horizon is tremendous opportunity for the economy. The India Economic Summit 2021 is all set to shine the spotlight on the growth of unicorns in the country, with some of the brightest entrepreneurs leading the curve. Darwinbox presents the Unicorn Race.
Panel, unicorns and entrepreneurs are Sanjeev Bikhchandani, founder and executive vice chairman, InfoEdge. Sanjeev started off as an entrepreneur and then an investor and mentor, and now is a messiah of India's internet startups. Mr. Bikhchandani's InfoEdge owns diverse portals from Naukri.com to Jeevansathi.com to 99acres.com to Shiksha.com, and he is excellent at recognizing business value and the fact that InfoEdge owns a stake in the online food delivery outfit, Zomato, and insurance marketplace PolicyBazaar.com just goes to prove it. Sanjeev, please be seated. Ronnie Screwvala, the co-founder and executive chairman, Upgrad. He's the most successful media and entertainment entrepreneur. As the founder of the UTP Group, he was also the founder trustee of Swadesh Foundation, founder of Unilaser Ventures, the board of advisors, ISEC India, and the founder of RSVP Movies. Now on to his second innings. He's one of the most successful digital entrepreneurs who recognized the potential of EdTech much before COVID hit and created Upgrad. Aditya Ghosh, currently co-founder Akasha Air and board member Oyo and Fab India. Mr. Ghosh was previously the president and the whole-time director of Indigo Airlines for over a decade. Akasha Air is all set to take to the skies, having just recently ordered $9 billion worth of aircraft, Boeing 737 MAX. So Aditya Ghosh is here. Gajendra Jangit, the co-founder and CMO of Cars24. With Cars24, he's revolutionizing the buying of pre-owned vehicles in India. Not only does he lead the unicorn startup, but he's also an angel investor. And to moderate this session, we've got Sindhu Kashyap, the associate editor at Your Story Media, India's leading online media venture for entrepreneurs and startups. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel on unicorns and entrepreneurs. Please be seated, gentlemen.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I think after a very interesting session following up, it's going to be quite a challenge. But unicorns itself is a very interesting topic and close to all of us. I think instead of 30, we have 39 unicorns right now, and over 70. But you know what's going to be interesting is to see that every week we get a note that says, you know, this company has become a unicorn, that company has been a unicorn. I would like to start with you actually, Gajendra, to understand. You recently, Cars24 recently became a unicorn in September. What does it mean as a company? What does it mean to you? Sudden media attention, sudden adulation, everyone is saying, amazing, you've reached there, you've become great. You know, I don't know, is it the unicorn tag that does that, or what is it exactly for you?
Yeah, it is very overwhelming, no doubt. But let me just correct you there that Cars24 became unicorn last year, 2020. Okay. And just, I think at the beginning of the question, you were citing numbers. When we became unicorn, we were around 38 unicorn India has ever had. Fast forward almost 1 year, India just added close to 38 more unicorn in last 12 months. So you can just see the pace at which the startup story, the growth story has been evolving in India. Yeah, it is very overwhelming. You know, we like to call it when, you know, coming in so much of funding, a lot of valuation, with great power comes greater responsibilities, right? So ultimately it is, you know, the investor has shown the trust on you guys that whatever you have done has been fantastic. But we are putting more money on you because we see a decade-long potential into it. So for us as a founders, to be honest, it's, you know, exciting, but at the same time we are nervous as well. Because there's so much of trust has been given by investors, our customers, and now the pressure is even more mounting upon us to make sure we deliver. We continue to deliver, not only for a few years, but continue for next 5 years or 10 years. So these are my 2 cents over here.
Thanks, Gajendra. You know, Ronnie, you also are a unicorn founder, no? Upgrad is also a unicorn. And this whole thing about unicorns, it kind of creates the system where some companies are unicorns, some companies are soonicorns. Now there's something called as decacorns. I don't know if we should, what are the next terms? So what is your take on this? What does it mean for the ecosystem? And I would like to understand from all of you. I mean, we can keep it conversational, so.
The most enjoyable corn I've ever had is when I go to the Marine Drive Seaface and I have Makkai Bhutta. And I just want to tell you, to me, that's the best memory that I can have. So I don't introspect too much on the unicorn. I think, firstly, every entrepreneur needs a pat on the back. It's a very lonely job. And I think, therefore, it's an inspirational title. But I think that's where it should stop. So maybe I'm the contrarian in the room from that perspective, but all I can say is it's a good pat in the back, but what is the message we're sending out to everyone? I think the word here, which is the unicorn race, I think we need to pace it a bit. So maybe it's the unicorn pace, and I don't mean the pace at which we're hurtling through, but just how important it is to go to necessarily pace it. So it is incredible that for a non-entrepreneurial country that we were, and from being job seekers, we are job creators, there's a lot to be celebratory about. But we're also a land of plenty in many sense, and I think the opportunities are going to be huge as we go forward. So I think we should just take this as I follow the motto that all glory is fleeting. I believe in it, and I think anyone who has that tag should take it for that evening and move on from there.
Right. Sanjeev, Aditya.
No, my view on this is that, and the advice we give all the startups we back, we invest, or any young startup founder I meet, is look, don't obsess with becoming a unicorn or focus on that at all. Obsess with stuff like customer satisfaction, revenue, cash flow, collections. A valuation is something the market gives you, and markets can change. Today there's liquidity, tomorrow there isn't. And that'll come and go. Just focus on real value you're creating and keep that is going on growing. It's fine. Valuation is important. It is important because it enables you to raise money at a certain dilution, and therefore, if you're raising a lower dilution, it's probably better for you, unless it's too high, in which case you are in a high valuation trap. But it's probably a good feeling. But beyond that, just forget about it and focus on the customer.
Right, Aditya.
So Sindhu, the way I look at it is that businesses should be about solving hard problems to solve, right? Now, how the market or how investors look at you, right, is like Ronnie was saying, that's a fleeting moment in time. Okay. Now, when the last couple of sessions, we looked at how India has performed or behaved in the last sort of 6-7 years. If you go back a few hundred years, right? India in the 17th century was close to 38% of the world's GDP. In 1947, we could not manufacture a pin. What we have to understand is that we as unicorn owners, participants, whatever it is, we are standing on the shoulders of 70 years of entrepreneurship, which has brought India back to a point where we can say that yes, we are gearing towards a double-digit, share of GDP in the world. Whether we are unicorns today, and I think there are now, it's going to be only a matter of time before we start talking about decacorns, right?
Yeah.
But that is, I agree with what Ronnie said. I agree with what Sanjeev is saying, and especially what he said that we are today in this sort of really strange tizzy where we are valuing success by the amount of money you can raise, right? That is only step one. But having said that, it certainly is a shot in the arm that there are more and more people within India and around the world who are willing to give you the custody of their hard-earned capital and say that yes, startups can be the force multiplier that can hurtle our country towards a bigger share of GDP going forward.
That's a larger view, but I wanted to bring out a point with all of you here. It also means a lot of wealth creation for the people of the company, for shareholders, for everyone who are associated with the startup. Now, if you look at just ESOPs alone, ESOPs, I remember 5-6 years back, was just not that much in conversation. But today you have it in conversations, with companies like Zomato that have gone public, or Nykaa and all of that. And these have been unicorns, really strong, solid businesses per se. So what does it mean in that sense? It is a good thing, good sign in that sense, right? If more companies reach the unicorn, decacorn track. Anyone can.
Yeah, look, I think sharing the wealth with those who help create it is important. It's more democratic. It is, it's something that should be done. But I think very importantly, you've got to build a sustainable business and which can justify that valuation in the long run, right? And keep on therefore increasing in valuation as you go along. And I think that is what people should focus on. And how do I improve the business constantly, continuously? Yeah? But sharing of wealth is good and useful.
Right.
I'd like to say just 1-2 things. One, I think I've been a first-generation entrepreneur, seen 2-3 generations. And I think the unicorn label may be a bit of a misnomer. If I want to be known more, I'd like to be the outlaster, not the unicorner. Okay? And I think businesses have to build to outlast people. So that's one. Just a second statistic for all that we're celebrating here, which we should celebrate. If there are 39 unicorns this year and a total of 70, there's 1/4 of them that have made these people unicorns. There's some, 15, 17 investment funds around the world that have actually pushed everyone and nudged them to have this tag. So something to introspect in, because we don't want that. And third, I think if you want to inspire people, it can't be too elitist. It needs to be something that everyone really looks at, and therefore I would say the Outlaster Club is where I'd like to belong.
Aditya.
Look, my father was a government servant. I grew up not too far away from here in a government flat. I definitely benefited from the stock options that I got at Indigo. So I'm ever grateful for that. At Akasa, we want to be an airline which has the most number of people, at least who will have the ability to earn out of stock options. But again, wealth is when you have more than what you think you need. Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can just keep going on and on and on. But having that ability to bring purpose and profit together, where people think that there is somehow we are making an impact on the lives of the communities we serve, as well as the colleagues who come and join us in the journey, that's a very addictive, incentive. And yes, absolutely, but I must also warn that in highly volatile businesses, stock options, ESOPs can also wipe out a lot of wealth of employees who cannot afford that.
Yeah.
So therefore, I am not in that black and white zone where I'll say that everybody must have a stock option or nobody should have.
Yeah.
It should be to those groups of employees who can actually sustain that volatility that comes with, running publicly listed companies, or for that matter, businesses where proof of concept is still far away.
Right.
I just want to quickly add there, because I think there's a risk element to what we're talking about here, which we don't get. As an entrepreneur, if you keep valuing your company and go up, I think everyone is not understanding the risk element, because you are actually guaranteeing to your incoming shareholders that is going to be the value. So what's happening is that an entrepreneur can dilute himself from 80% to 20%, becoming a $4 billion company. But at that level, he is giving a 1x return to all his investors. And when things go south, he could be holding 0% in the company. And I think ESOPs will have the similar path taken. So all I'm saying is we should maintain a good, balanced approach to everything that we look and do.
Right, right.
I'd just like to share a story. When we started back in 2015, and at that point of time, we were hiring the key man for the brand. And at that point of time, whenever we used to talk about on the table, and because most of the people were coming from the well-paid corporate jobs, and they were keen to switch, okay, let's see what's in the startup. And of course, we are very frugal about the money, and we wanted to make sure that we can't pay you as much as you get paid at the corporate. Maybe we can pay you a little lesser and offset it with the equity option. And at that point of time, hardly anyone used to have that much of trust on the ESOP, because they never seen becoming a reality. Few of them we could convert, few of them we couldn't, but I could see the sense that appreciation of ESOP turning into reality was hardly there. I think the fast forward 6-7 years, I can see that perception has changed dramatically. People, thanks to so many successful startups now really cashing out on the wealth to the people who invested their time and time and effort in the growth of the company. So in my view, the perception is changing quite a bit. People are realizing that working in a startup is, of course, a high-risk environment. Like Ronnie said, the tide can go any way, right? Anything can happen at any point of time. But there is a reward for it. And that reward is real. It's not imaginary, right? So a lot of has changed.
Right. When we're talking about the tide can go anywhere, it's obvious that this tide will also shift. Unicorns getting created, the funding that's being pumped up into the ecosystem. So how can this be sustained in the long term? Is it sustainable in the long term, A? And where do you see it headed now? Sanjeev?
No, I mean, look, company fundamentals have to justify the valuation eventually. See, in the long run, you will be valued of an earnings multiple. Right? In the long run. Now, when is that long run? Remains to be seen. But kabhi na kabhi aayega. So you have to finally, execute every day, every week, every month, every quarter, so that the company gets to a place where you say, hey, this is cool. Now let's, maybe the valuation will go further now.
Right. Right. Ronnie, you had a point to make.
Yeah, no, I think it's sustainable in many ways. It's sustainable because I think at the core of it, as Vikrant rightly put it, we're attracting talent. The entrepreneurial ecosystem is now very respectful. When I started up, it was like, oh, you couldn't get yourself a good job, right? So you have to become an entrepreneur. So I think it is a much more respected,
right.
And startups is something which is attracting the best of the talent. So if you take that, you harness that, and you don't let some of the other frills come in your way and actually build a sustainable business, and I keep using the word long-lasting business, of course it's sustainable.
Either one of you, whoever wants to go first.
To me, of course, it's going to last long. As long as I think every startup really go after value creation than just a valuation. I think that's what is most important. You keep on ensuring that ultimately you are delivering a value to your end customer. and he's getting a benefit out of it. And don't get carried away by all those higher valuations. As long as this lasts, I think the startup growth story will continue.
Right.
Okay. Is the Indian economy going in a certain direction? Yes. Do we have the ability to catapult ourselves and move faster? Yes. If we have, as we stand today, if we have 2% population growth and we have 4% inflation and 10% GDP growth, we in 10 years' time, in actually 9 years' time, can look at a $10 trillion economy. If you're going to have a $5 trillion economy, $8 trillion economy, and hopefully a $10 trillion economy, obviously this thing is going to push a lot of entrepreneurial businesses and help them to outlast. Now the question really is that in this 10-year journey, there will be many storms. One thing I've known, coming from the businesses that I have, one certainty of life is every year there is going to be a crisis, right? Now the question really is that what is that time frame that you look at to outlast, right? And therefore, if a certain business or a certain new business is going through its downside, one has to understand that there will be a point of time where it will go through, right? So one has to also, despite coming from, many startups and having scaled up many businesses, I'll also say one has to be patient and one has to be able to, last out that storm, and kind of, be that bamboo tree which kind of then sways and ducks and not try to kind of, hold out where, the tree trunk kind of breaks. But I am, immensely bullish on India.
Right.
Right. And I'm publicly so. And that's why I spent all my life here. I did not go to Hindu college. I used to come to Arnab's hostel, actually, He's my senior from school, though.
Oh.
But I'm tremendously bullish that if you see a slightly longer term, 8, 9 years, 10-year journey, then definitely there is enough momentum and an enabling environment for many more unicorns, decacorns to kind of, move, to rise out of India and also last out.
Aditya, I just want to stop you then ask you further because it's very interesting. You've traditionally been in a business which
I'm a sucker for punishment. Travel, retail, hospitality.
It's all businesses that have not exactly, everyone's scary to venture into, but you not only ventured in them, but have made them thrive, and thrive how? Like, I have to share this anecdote. Once I was flying Indigo, and this was the first time I met Aditya, and everyone had told me, at Indigo, when you walk into the airline, just mention his name and everyone will give you royal treatment. And I didn't believe that. I mean, I think journalists by nature have to be a little skeptical, so I didn't believe that. So I tried to test it, and I tested it from the ground staff to the airline crew. Everyone's like, ma'am, Aditya. Oh, ma'am, Aditya. So that's something. I mean, that's something to, people loving
Aditya,
their boss.
she just gave every prospective customer Akasa what to say when they board a flight.
Yeah, exactly. So just remember that in 2022.
Akasa got a problem day one. Huh?
So, no, but coming back to my question, Aditya, just wanted to understand, how do you do that? Especially in businesses that are traditionally tough, considered tougher to become profitable, to become sustainable. How do you do that? And tech startups have that diciness going on right now.
Well, see, I'm not only did I come into these crazy businesses, but I'm actually a history graduate, right? So I did law. I did not do engineering school or business school. But that also taught me the humility to know that my colleagues who are around me, they are my biggest teachers, and I treat each one of my colleagues as my guru. Whether it is somebody who's checking a customer at an airport or a hotel, or somebody who's selling a Fab India kurta at a retail store, I have something to learn from them every day. And there are very few people, and I'll say I'm unfairly lucky that you get to go to a job where you learn something new every day. So when you do that, then you understand that you also want to create a workplace where you would want to come there as a young, junior colleague. And once you kind of put yourself into that person's shoes, the rest of the workplace happens automatically.
Wow.
So, and especially in the businesses that you mentioned, right? The airline business where I've spent so much of my time and now I'm doing it again. One thing is the universal truth. Everybody is an equal, we just have different roles to play. When that plane is all set to take off, if that marshaller does not come in front of that plane and wave the signals, I, as the CEO of the airline, cannot make that plane move. So every takeoff is a deep reminder, or should be a deep reminder to a founder or CEO of an airline, that you just have a different role to play. We are all equals here.
Yeah.
And that's why I had great fun kind of working with, people that I did actually. And I'm ever grateful to them. Thank God they were brand ambassadors to very skeptical journalists like you.
But on that note, I want to come to you, Gajendra, just to understand, when you are in this high rush environment where, everyone is, now I'm sure the scrutiny is much higher on Cars 24, but you have taken a really long journey. It's not been easy. You've seen the ups and downs, but from now on, the ups and downs get even more deeper scrutinized. How do you deal with that?
I think last 6 years have been very eventful. We have seen many downside and upside both, whether it's economical or something else. So I think we've been well prepped for any kind of situation which may come, whatsoever way ahead. Starting from, demonetization, which kind of, put a pause in, into the economy as well as the used car industry, followed by GST. So there's so many fundamental level changes has happened, which kind of shook our boat quite a bit and really taught us lesson. Then how to really put yourself in a situation, then how can really get out of it strong. And then, of course, in 2020, COVID happened, which kind of tanked the entire business for quite a few months. But one thing which we learned after our first sit at demonetization, that always try to stay strong. Don't succumb to the pressure. Don't succumb to the situation, right? It shall pass. But at the same time, don't take an easy decision. It's very easy to, cut everything, and then just be very lean. But always think what is the likelihood of this event to happen for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and take a long-term decision. Don't take decisions a high amount of risk and which can really backfire at you 6 months or a year or 2 years down the line. So we realized that, and I think another example I would call out during the time of COVID. For 2 months, I think country was almost under lockdown, and so does our sales. And we were into immense pressure to really reduce cost, and it was hurting us, right? It's not an easy to show such a high, burn without making any revenue. And so many times we actually evaluated how do we cut costs. Of course, first thing you do is you cut down your variable cost, right? And then you move to your fixed cost. And then there's a hard decision about you got so much of staff which you have, which was the pre-COVID level, and now businesses are zero, and you don't even know when that will go back to, pre-COVID level. Now what to do about it? And it's a very extremely difficult situation, right? So at that point of time, we really told ourselves that this is not a economy-led disaster. This is not something which, this has not happened in anyone's life before. Yeah. And ultimately, we are what we built, each and every employee of Cars 24 have built, who we are today. And it is a difficult time for each and everyone, not for certain population, right? So we really, this is a thing, this is where we will hold our grounds, no matter what kind of scrutiny come to us by investors or anyone else. But we as a founders made a decision, we will not going to cut cost. We'll wait how it happens. Till our last moment, we did not even cut a single headcount to entire our organization. And I think we came out very strongly after that.
But that could work both ways, right, Gajendra? Yeah. It really, it's a gamble you take. So how do you make that gamble?
So startup is always a gamble because you take bold bets. You take bold bets and you are like, we have gone wrong. We have gone wrong many times and we really had to take hard decisions. But when you know that you have gone wrong and still you stick to the wrong decision is where, you need to correct yourself. Don't get emotionally attached to your decisions, which have taken at a different context, different time. So as long as you are really contextual, you're really taking the best decision for your customers, for your employees at that point of time, and then really flow with it.
Right. Ronnie and Sanjeev, both of you have built businesses grounds up at a time when, startups were obviously, like you said, rightly said, Ronnie, at one point in India, if you said you're being an entrepreneur, they thought you're not going to get a job. And now everyone is dreaming of starting up, which is brilliant. Everyone wants to be a job creator. But I want to understand from both of you what it takes to build a business from grounds up. When there is nothing like a valuation, unicorn, decacorn, none of these fancy terms are there, what does it take to build a business then? And everyone is against you.
Well, firstly, I think inspiration is a very important part of it. And you need to be self-inspired on an ongoing basis. So I think inspiration is a very underrated but a very, very important part of it. Because at the end of the day, when you're attracting team members, they're coming to work for you. I think what Aditya kind of spelled out in his own way, of the HR element and the people element of an airline and what he built, that's really the core of the culture. So I think inspiration and inspiring people can get you through many, 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 many challenges and many, many hard times. And I know it's a soft power versus a hard power. You may say you need money. I would trade money for inspiration many days to actually keep an organization going through tough and tough. The second one is your ability to have a little bit of sense of humor. Because if you can take a worst case situation and feel 6 months later, am I going to laugh about this or is it going to be the end of the world? I think you can handle worst case situations kind of very well. And the third one, I think for all of us here and for most entrepreneurs, it's about staying the course, right? Because you can't time success, you can't time failure. So I think these three is something that I think has driven me most of my years and definitely through most of my challenges.
Look, in my personal case, I quit my job in 1990 and became an entrepreneur. And for the first 7 years, I drifted into a whole bunch of small things. Teaching, training, report writing, whatever came my way to survive. There was no big idea, there was nothing. It was just, I didn't want to be a corporate sector executive, so I don't want that life. And then we launched Naukri in 97 as one more small idea. At that time, there were only 14,000 internet accounts in the country. So it was another small idea and a series of small ideas. And so on this one, suddenly we discovered, hey, this may be a big idea after all. We had stumbled upon a big idea. Okay, so there was no grand vision, there was no, anything. It was just, let's see what happens. So now, those 10 years, and we raised venture capital in the year 2000, so 10 years of bootstrapping. Right? Those 10 years, I think there was lack of capital, poor infrastructure, extreme frugality. In those 10 years, for 6 years, I didn't take a salary. I would teach on weekends to earn some money. Okay, and so on. So I think I really resonate when Ronnie talks about staying power. You got to be resilient. You got to just stay the course, and hopefully things will happen at some point in time. But keep on focusing on the customer. I think that's the other thing. Try and find customers, unsolved problems, and solve them. So, little story about Naukri, how I got the idea. In my last job, I was working in H&M, a company that made Horlicks, and I was in marketing, working on Horlicks actually. And it was an open hall, and there was 8 or 10 of us in that open hall. And I used to observe that every time the office copy of Business India would come in, everybody would read it from the back. Because in those days, there were 35 to 40 pages of appointment ads at the back of Business India. So people do not read the articles, and this may pain you as a journalist, but people do look at the ads before they read the articles, right? And that's when I figured that jobs are a high interest category of information. And when I saw the net for the first time, I did a very simple thing. Got 29 newspapers around the country and put those job ads on the net, and traffic began to come because I knew that people want to look at jobs. So that customer insight, I think, is really important. So staying the course, being frugal, customer insight. One little last story on customer insight. When I met Deepinder Goyal for the first time, right, I asked him, Deepinder, ye idea kahan se aaya? Where did you get this idea? And in those days, Zomato was not food delivery. It was a restaurant listing. Yeah. But the one thing they had was they had all the menu cards. And it was the only site with all the menu cards. Because other sites had got photos and reviews and things, but no, they did not have menu cards. Right? So every restaurant menu card was there. And I used to use the site. I liked it. I reached out to him. I didn't know him. It was a cold call. And I said, let's meet. And I said, boss, ye idea kahan se aaya? Where did you get the idea from? He says, I was working in Bain Consulting in Gurgaon. And there were 55 of 60 of us there, mostly young, mostly male, mostly single, many living away from home. office hours were long in the sense that consulting is, you invariably have 2 meals in the office, lunch and dinner. And they wouldn't get food from home. Office had a cafeteria that would not serve food, but you could bring your own food and eat it, which meant you had to order in. And to make life easy for the employees, the admin guys had collected all the delivery menu cards of all the restaurants that deliver there and kept them in a file folder. And Dipinder said, boy, the real pain, 1 o'clock, you're standing in line to see the file, you see it for 2 minutes, then you order, food comes in 45 minutes, then you come back. Huge waste of time. Okay, and so here's one Saturday I came in and I scanned all the menu cards and I put them up on my personal page on the office intranet. And 2 days later, the IT infra guy came to me and said, hey, what have you done? Why is 98% of internal traffic going to your page? So penny dropped. The customers had told him that, listen, menu cards have value. And he went around on weekends aggregating menu cards. When he had 800, he launched a site.
Right.
Okay, and traffic came. So customer insight, very important, very important.
Yeah, no, I want to second that. I think vision is a little overrated. It's very good in hindsight. And most vision actually is really something that's fine-tuned over a period of time. And I think serendipity is underrated. Because I think most of the time you set out to do something else, by the time you actually implement it, it's quite different than what you set out to do. If everyone just went with their single vision as is looked at from the outside, I think half of whatever's happening would not happen.
Right. My last question, I think Arnab has a few questions, and I don't think so. I think the audience has a few questions. Before we get to that, my last question to all of you, when it comes to funding and unicorn race and all of that, we all know it's going to slow down. And covering this space, I do know that, it follows a cycle. Everything follows a cycle. So when this slump will start, whenever it does start, what does it mean for the startups and what should the founders be wary of? Even the unicorns.
As always, it separates the men for the boys. And I don't want to be sexist, but hopefully, because there's now 20-25% of entrepreneurs today are women, very proudly. So it'll separate the women from the girls.
Aditya.
I actually don't, see that slump coming in terms of, that funding will dry up. What kind of ideas get backed might change. And if I stick my neck out and I'll say that companies that are more purpose-driven, which have a larger social impact, or are trying to solve for some really hard problem to solve in developing countries like India, I think there is enough and more capital available there, right? What might be happening where there is a certain idea in the US, you copy that and paste it here and try to do it. Those kind of ideas, people might just get a little bit tired of. But something where somebody says, look, we are a country of 1.4 billion people. We have to create many more jobs. We have one of the youngest populations in the world. There is massive demand of trying to solve really hard problems to solve, which are connected to the essential needs of a human being. Within my lifetime, there are enough ideas and there is enough funding. Right? I mean, that's at least my view on it.
Rajendra.
I think I would be more worried about slump in funding versus slump in consumer demand. Because as long as the consumer demand is there and the customer to whom you are adding value, if those are there, even if there is a small downturn when it comes to issue of capital in the market, you will come out. And of course, having said so, you should have your unit economics in play, the planning, whatever at any given point of time, whatever funding you have, you should have at least 2 years of runway, so that in case of any event which goes more than what you expected, at least you have more than enough time to come out of it. So I would be more worried about if there is any fundamental change of consumer behavior is happening, which can have negatively impact your growth. That is what will be more concerning to me. And if as and when it happens, predict way before it comes, do what is in your control, and come out of it stronger than before.
Right. Sanjeev.
Markets go up, markets go down. There are ebbs and flows in capital. I think the key is 2 things. One is keep on working every day, every week, every month on improving your business fundamentally. Right? Number 1. Number 2 is, this may sound a little conservative, but I always tell our investing companies, have a plan B. What if you are unable to raise your next round? Will you die or will you somehow manage to adapt and survive? So what is your plan B? And then, go for broke. It's okay.
Audience, someone in the audience had a question.
Yeah.
Apramaya, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Hi, Sanjeev. Apramaya, co-founder and CEO of Coup. I had a question for you. From the outside, everybody's always said companies are overvalued. Ever since, it used to take a decade to become a unicorn to now when it takes only 6 months to become a unicorn. We've been saying this, right? What do you think will happen in the 2030s? Will it become a norm that a unicorn is born with the first round of funding? Will we still be saying companies are overvalued? What's your thought on that?
Well, look, it's hard to predict. I'm slightly old school. But look, people are valuing growth as well. So if you're getting the growth, right, you'll still be valued. Okay, perhaps you'll be valued ahead of your fundamentals, right? If the market is frothy, you'll be valued even more ahead of your fundamentals. But fundamentally, you have to be creating some value and getting some growth. So value and growth together are a very good combination. Now, what will how many months will it take to become a unicorn? I have no clue. Okay, but go for growth, go for creating value. With a sensible balance.
Hi, this is Ganesh Kaur. Sanjeev, my question is to you. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been in this space, cybersecurity space for last 10 years now. I'm doing my own startup. The aspect we get today is that we get a lot of opportunities from investors who tell us, if you move your base outside India, we will value you better, we will fund you better, right? It could be UK, US. And that's the first question we generally get asked. Whereas the market opportunity today, even the business in which I am, cybersecurity or consumer security, is in there. Now, how do we fight this evil out? Right? And this is something which I have seen with a lot of other entrepreneurs and a lot of VCs. The first thing which they use, okay, 5 million here. Next thing is you are setting up a base outside India. Thank you.
Look, I have spoken out against flipping, but it is individually rational for these investors and for these companies to externalize, individually rational, right? But why do they do it? They do it because of some of the bureaucracy and red tape of India they're unhappy with, right? And some of these pertain to exits and RBI rules and so on and so on. So what I do believe the government should do is to study it in depth. What is it that is causing people to say, I'd much rather invest in a foreign domicile company, Indian domicile company, and try and fix those problems. I do believe it's desirable that companies domicile in India, but create conditions where the best investors in the world want them to domicile in India, and it's fine.
I think there's a question there, but just 1 minute before I get to you. Sanjeev, you brought a point about what the government can do. There is a lot of initiatives being done by the government and the private sector, but what more can be done? And if I could understand from all of you on that.
See, the thing is the government is a very complex organization, right? There are many departments, many ministries. And sometimes, when we recommend something which is great for startups, that there will be more domicile in India, it goes against something else the government is trying to do in some other ministry, okay? So, for example, if you, as an individual investor, come into a startup in India, right, from overseas, and now let's say you invest in 10 startups, one works, and you get a 30x return. The moment you want to take out that money, RBI antenna go up. Hey, this guy put in 100 rupees, how come he's taking 3,000 rupees back? Is there something wrong here? What RBI does not see is the rest of the portfolio where he may have lost money. Now, this causes a delay in clearances, which then gets investors hassled, and they say, it's better to invest in an Indian company domiciled outside India. So we've got to fix stuff like this.
Right. Ronnie?
Well, look, my simple answer is, you're the entrepreneur, you're the founder, you have to figure out the destiny of your company. I don't think you should be changing domicile of your company because one or two investors say that, because that's a transient person, you're the permanent person there. And I think you should keep that in mind in whatever you want to do. If that's right for your business, do it. But 9 out of 10 times, I don't think it adds up personally. There'll always be a situation where there'll be ease to do business somewhere else versus here. Those markets in which they may be easy to do business could be a highly competitive business. So I would say to a lot of entrepreneurs here today, It's tough maybe in some parts to do business here, but you're creating and you're market making, which is a phenomenal challenge. In many other places, it's a very competitive. I don't think 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs from here would be able to survive in such competitive markets. So it's your company, your vision, what you want to do, take the right decision.
I think
What the government can do?
government can.
Yeah. So I kind of think of 6 things. Right? One is that how much can the government spend, a higher percentage of the government spending in actual R&D, right? Whether themselves or encourage other private players to spend in R&D and support that. Number 2 is that there needs to be some kind of assistance in lower cost of risk capital. Okay. And up to a certain stage. I'm not saying that you've got to give it to somebody who's already become a unicorn or whatever it is. Right? Number 3 is that in the first few years, there is some ability to get some tax relief, which then at a later stage you can take back, right? We have seen it in the 90s, in the 2000s with, for example, export industry, etc., etc. Like, lots of businesses got created because of the tax SOPs and the special economic zones and the equivalent of that. Number 4, United States especially, Israel, China have clearly shown that where startups are encouraged to collaborate with government projects, military projects, large infrastructure projects, it leads to a certain environment where technology is given a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of military, technology that then gets applied to private commercial, places at a later stage. The 5th is international exposure. In a very structured manner, you can, create fellowships, etc., where you do nothing. You just take people and expose youngsters and young entrepreneurs to what's happening in the rest of the world. Go stay there for a year. Go, work there. Incubation centers not within India, but in Indian incubation centers in other parts of the world. And finally, especially for many founders, it's a tactical thing, but differential voting rights, etc., will help them be able to collaborate with venture capitalists and investors in a far better way. These are the 6 things that I can think of.
No, I think Aditya sums it up very well.
Been there.
Arnav, you had a question.
No, I have 2 questions. One is to Ronnie. Ronnie, how do you create magic a second time? They say you can't create magic a second time.
I'm rubbing off.
I'll get you also. I'm coming to you. But should I shoot my 2 questions? One is for you, one is for him. So the one, how do you create magic a second time? This young man sitting to your left is looking at you aspirationally. You've done it. So what changed? Question to you. Don't answer. I'll ask the young man who's a year junior to me from school and college. Aditya, look here. You know that you and I both wanted to go to B school.
That's right.
And I don't know if you remember, but you came to the Hindu College hostel looking for a second-hand copy of IMS Brilliant Management Entrance Tutorials, and I asked you for too much money. And so,
How much was it, Arnav?
Some 700 rupees. So the thing is, I never went to B school, neither did you.
Yeah.
You did law. And the question to you is, sometimes they say knowing too much makes you risk averse.
Yes.
I feel I don't know, still people in office tell me I don't know how to read an Excel sheet. If I knew how to read an Excel sheet, I would be only imagining the risks.
Yeah.
And when I turned entrepreneur, I never knew the risks as much as I know today. Otherwise, I would have never stepped into the shoes there. So understand my question,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Is knowing too much bad? The question to you. And to you, Ronnie, how do you create magic a second time?
First you.
How did I get what?
So the question to you, which is the
Because
most
it was
important
such a more
question.
detailed question that I wanted my short question.
How do you create the magic the second time?
I don't know. The magic is still to be created from that perspective. I think there's no magic. I think we're all starting up in a very different pace. So no, I disclaim that. I think if you're clear of what you want to do, if your intent is clear, if your impact is high, I think, and if you're willing to stay the course, And I think partly my grounding. I come from a Parsi background, middle class, lower middle class background. I think that helped me a lot in everything because you stay with your feet on the ground at all times. And I think the lessons that I learned when you get punched around when you're a first generation entrepreneur, I think stood me in big stead the second time around.
Well, Arnab, I think, the core to entrepreneurship, as opposed to being a professional manager, is knowing that failure is a real risk, right? That you can lose everything. So starting off with that acknowledgement is extremely important. The second is that after you've got that into your head, saying that, look, I actually don't know what are all the steps in this ladder, but I somehow directionally know where I need to get to, And I think kind of saying that it's okay that I do not know all the steps in that ladder, because I have never been able to create a business plan that was accurate 365 days later, right? So therefore, with that, knowing little less and definitely not knowing Excel sheets is probably a good thing.
Okay, I think we're off time. I know you have questions. Can we take one more question? There's a gentleman and a woman here.
I think there were a lot of ladies wanting to ask a question.
Yeah, I think there was a lady,
we should give the mic to the lady.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
I've got answers of all my questions, but I'm very happy to see you because you are the genius person who are giving very important services to the common people. And thank you, Arnab Goswami, for bringing them on the stage. I'm really grateful for that.
She had a question. After you, she also had a question.
I am Yogendra Kapoor, chartered accountant by profession and an economist. My question is to Mr. Ronnie. Well, when I see the domestic industry, we see that there are enough of people in industry who have great cash reserves. My point is that why those cash reserves, when it's like coming to investment into new startups, that is not coming as a thrust by them, because getting finance from the bank and other institutions is always a challenge for a startup.
Sorry, I've got a little bit of tinnitus, so I may not have heard the question right. Can somebody
why don't traditionally...
Why are they not investing and therefore that becomes a source of capital as opposed to...
Yeah, I think it's a very important question as to why Indian capital is not following that. But I think Sanjeev, for example, is a true example of Indian capital doing that. I think companies are not supposed necessarily to use cash from balance sheets to be venture capitalists. They're meant for their core, because for shareholders, I think the first answer is what's your core, what's your focus? I don't think people are giving premiums to people for being venture capitalists, and that's why there's a holding company discount that happens as soon as you start doing that in the first place. So personally, I don't think balance sheet cash reserves should be spent because shareholders and people are backing you for your vision, not for your uncanny knack of backing other people's vision.
There's just one, okay, I'm so sorry, but time is genuinely up. So thank you so much, Sanjeev. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Aditya, and thank you, Gajendra.
Thank you, panel. I'm sure the question can be taken offline. So we've got